Polybridge 3 is about to release, so let's take a look at everything that's changed since Polybridge 2 so that you can be ready for when it releases. First of all, when you start up the game, you're greeted by a pretty cool intro. So first of all, this main screen, there's a couple changes that are immediately noticeable on here. First of all, there's a profile system. In here, you can switch between different accounts that have completely different settings, different campaign progress, and right here it will show how many levels you've beaten on this profile. You can just make a profile, name it anything you want, and then you can edit it with a profile icon and even set the color of it. And then when it's selected, you will just be playing on it and you'll have a completely blank slate. Right now I'm in the tutorial. Another thing that's immediately noticeable is there's a continue button. So when you boot up the game, it will bring you straight to the last campaign level that you played if you just press the continue button, and you can go straight back to what you're doing. So if I go to my main account, it will take me back to the level I was just on. Another thing that's noticeable is that the workshop has the Steam icon again. So it's like Polybridge 1 where the workshop is now through Steam. So all of them have the star rating system, like how Steam does it. And then when you click on it, it's subscribe, you can upvote, downvote, favorite. And then there's the Steam Workshop ID. And then most of the other stuff is similar to how it worked in Polybridge 2. Another thing you might notice when you're in this workshop menu is that there's a mods section. And you can even make mods through this. In here, you can see that there's some mods that are written in Lua. These mods will just add certain things. Like this one will show the level ID when you're in the level or something. I don't actually know. I haven't used this mod. But then here, you can see that there's mods that can add new items to the game. So if we subscribe to this, takes a second, then we can click activate. And when we go into the sandbox, then there's this UGC vehicles and UGC planes section. And then in the decoration tab, which I'll get to more later, there'll be decorations. So in here we can add the payload cart from, I'm assuming this is from Team Fortress 2, I haven't really played that game much. But we can just remove this vehicle, and that's a modded vehicle that's just in the game. And that's all brand new. This is something that anyone with some technical knowledge and the ability to follow a tutorial will be able to make. So we'll be able to make some levels that are pretty creative and unique. And then in the planes section, we have the Doomsday rocket. So after this gets the flag, I'm assuming the rocket will just go through. So all these modded things are going to make workshop levels extremely interesting. And then in the objects section, there are these dynamic props that have been added. So these are a way to have more unique props than just the custom shapes that we had in Polybridge 2. So these are all ones that are from the specific terrain that we're in. So since we're in this like toxic wasteland thing, all of the dynamic props are related to that. And there's also static props, and these ones are what we're used to, the ones that don't move. But dynamic props, they can be pushed around, so like this anvil vehicle, well I guess the anvil's really heavy. I'll try with a cardboard box instead. This can actually be moved slightly. This thing's really weak. I'm going to make it powerfuler so we can see this better. So the cardboard box is actually able to move once it's hit, which is completely new. In addition to this, custom shapes. Now they can have textures. If we come over here, we can set the texture to be these different things. And one of them is even invisible. So if we set it to be a rock, then when we go in here, it looks like a rock. Or we could set it to be wood, and now it's wood. So you can switch between these things to make more interesting looking design. Another thing is you can save the custom shape, and then after you save it, you can name it. So my wood. And then it's stored here, so if you want to restore that custom shape into any level, I believe, you can just click that and you'll have that shape. There's a lot of other things with the sandbox that I'll get to in a minute, but I'm going to go back to the main menu. So if we head over to the campaign, you'll notice that there are several levels. I believe in Polybridge 2 we had around 7 worlds. With the bonus worlds it might have been 8. But in here we can already see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 worlds. And there's even, I think, a bonus world once you complete all of them. And each of these can have a variety of number of levels. There's 10 on this one, 11, 13, 12, 13, 13, 14, 12. So it seems like they go up to 14. And if you look closely at each of these, they have a difficulty rating. So each of the rows is one difficulty. And they also have something that they focus on. So this world focuses on pre-builds, which is something I'll get to later, but this one focuses on hydraulics, and this one is just a generic sort of thing. So Desert Springs, for example, will be mostly about doing stuff with springs. And there's some levels that have T next to them, and those mean that they're a tutorial level. Another thing that you might notice is that there's no numbers for the worlds. Now they're categorized with letters. So this is MM04 because it's Minor Mountains level 4. That kind of eliminates all the linearity of the levels that we had in Polybridge 1 and 2. This world selection screen is pretty nice, all of these world icons, and you can switch between them. It makes it so you have a lot of options. When you're playing through, you normally will have these unlock. When you're playing through, the levels will unlock by difficulty. Once you complete enough of level 2 worlds, or I think it's like 10 levels or something, then you'll be able to play level 3, and then once you play enough level 3 levels, then you'll be able to get to level 4. That, I think, is a pretty good system to make sure that everyone is playing enough and not necessarily locked down to the early levels if they want to move on to the later ones. Down here, there's the My Rankings, Achievements, and Leaderboards. I'm pretty sure this is something that we had in Polybridge 2, but I mean, it's slightly different now, because now we have 3 leaderboards. Before we had lowest budget and lowest budget unbreaking, but now we have a lowest stress leaderboard. This is showing my ratings for the lowest stress on different levels. So you can switch between all the worlds here, and you can sort by your rank, score, percentage, and then you can see the different leaderboards. It takes a second for them to load in, and it tells you your total budget for these leaderboards, or total stress for the leaderboards, which I'm not that interested in, but I'm sure some people are interested in. In the achievements, there's a lot more achievements than before. I like this. The achievements aren't necessarily just beating levels. A lot of them are more interesting things, like this one's install a mod. This one's complete this world in 5 minutes or less. This makes the achievements a bit more interesting than just play the whole game and beat it and then you get all the achievements. The leaderboards tab will let you see the same leaderboards that you would see when you're finishing the level, except you can see quite a bit more people than before. You still can't scroll on here, but you can see a lot of people, and you can go to any level and see that. And what you might have seen there, but there are now histograms again. So when you complete the level, you'll get to see where you lay on the histogram of scores. This was a thing in Polybridge 1, but not in Polybridge 2. If we go into build mode, I'll pick this level. You'll notice that there is no reinforced road anymore. They made road a bit stronger, but also more expensive. And I feel like this is a good change. I think reinforced road was a bit redundant. But there's also a new material over here called foundation. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. Springs do not have adjustment anymore. So they're just a spring. You can enable adjustments in sandbox levels, so some workshop levels will still have adjustments, but none of the campaign levels have spring adjustments enabled. Another thing that you can notice here is that there's a box that's light. This is a build zone. So if I try to build outside of here, it will not let me. And it will say cannot build outside build zones. This is a new mechanic that's been added for this game to kind of restrict where you can build, which can add some really nice gimmicks. So this level, for example, you can only build up here, but there's a car that has to get across down here. So you use the springs to make it so that the bridge can fall down, and then this bottom car can drive across it, when normally you could just build a bridge down there. There's another new mechanic called pre-builds, but these pre-builds, as you can see here, like these roads, they have these gray nodes on them, which means they're pre-builds. So they're here by default when you boot into the level. Like if I clear this, they're there, and you can't delete them or modify them. And you basically just have to build around them. So for this level, you have to build your bridge in the shape of this. And here's foundation. Or foundation is enabled here, so I'll demonstrate how that works real quick. So foundation, it costs a base $15,000, so it's not cheap at all. And then $900 extra for every meter tall it is. But it's really powerful, because if we place it, you can see that it creates a static joint here. So once it's placed, you can connect stuff to it and it will not move at all. It's basically adding a pillar. It just costs a lot. If you right click it, you can move it around. And if you move it too far, the material is going to be deleted. And you cannot place it through materials. Well, that's kind of a lie. Materials can go through foundation, but the nodes cannot. See, I can't put a node in here. And roads cannot go through foundation, and vehicles cannot go through foundation. You also can't place foundation on top of planes or boats or something. Anything that's going to go through the foundation, you can't place it there. So foundation can be very powerful, but it's also very expensive. Like this used up almost all of my budget already. And showing from that, the pre-builts that are required, like these ones where you can't move them, they do not go towards your budget. Up here, there's the question mark icon, and this was something that we had in Polybridge 2. It was help, and it gave you a list of tips that you could read, but they weren't very useful most of the time. So the help system has been replaced with giving you suggestions for things that you can do. So on the earlier levels, there's actually dev solutions. You can watch a video of the dev solution, and then if you like it, you can show the preview, and then it will give you a transparent thing that you can build it off of to help you complete the level. And then if you go to later levels where there aren't dev solutions, so normally the world with three sheep difficulties or higher are like this, there's no dev solutions, so when you press help, it will just open the gallery and you can look at user solutions. If we look at the gallery, we can tell that it's quite a bit higher quality than in Polybridge 2. And that's because in Polybridge 3, if we go to the settings, there's a replays section, and they can go up to 720p by default and up to 60 seconds. And you can even configure which folder it will be in. And the replays are separate by profile as well. Almost all of the files are separate by profile. Another thing about the campaign is that there are no challenge levels. So all the worlds are just the levels that are here. There's no challenge variations of the level. People will be able to, of course, post challenge levels on the workshop, but there's no official challenge levels, because at least I believe, and I think a lot of other people feel this way, that they'd rather just play a new level than just a slightly modified version of a level that they've already played. So I'm pretty happy with this. If we head back to the sandbox, if we go to the decoration tab, there's a brand new system for decorating the levels. So all of these tabs are different decorations that are themed around the area. So right now, I am in the Alpine theme. So these are the decorations that are designed specifically for Alpine, but I can take decorations from any world and use them here. So I could put a cactus in the Alpine mountains. And down here, there's user-generated content decorations, which are also from the mod. So the mod that I downloaded has a whole bunch of TF2 stuff. So I can drag in this sentry, and when I play the level, it will be there. The decorations do not have collisions, so things can go straight through them. But you can, if you want to, for example, take a custom shape. You can't really see the decorations when you're in this mode, which is a bit of an oversight in my opinion. But you can try to trace around the decoration with the custom shape. If we edit the shape to be around where the cactus is, and then we set it to static, then we can give it the invisible texture, and the forklift will crash into that custom shape when it gets to the cactus. I mean, it's not perfect, but you can kind of add fake collisions using custom shapes in that way. But if you don't want to have it collide at all, you can switch to the top view, and you can just drag it off to the side. So they can be positioned in 3D. They have 3D rotation using these, and you can scale them up in different directions, and you can even toggle whether they'll show up when they're being built. So they're very customizable. You can use it to put sunken ships in the water or ships in the water that aren't sunken. You can really do whatever you want to position them. There's also a new thing called God mode, which I guess they replaced with just called ignore build restrictions. But if we build this, for example, let's say we wanted to make this be pre-built, we can highlight it within here and set it to pre-built cannot delete. There's also a pre-built can delete. This is something that I didn't really quite show in the level, but if you have a pre-built that you can delete, it will show up when the level is loaded, but they can just delete it if they want to and not use it, and that will account for the budget. But we set it to pre-built can't delete, so right now you can't delete it, but if you're in God mode, you can still edit it. This only applies for in the sandbox, of course. It makes it a bit easier to design the levels that involve pre-builts in sandbox mode, because if you turn this off, then of course you can't delete these anymore. There's a lot more vehicles than in Polybridge 2. There's a couple new ones and a couple variations of old ones, but for the most part there's a lot. And when you drag one in, let's say I don't really like the color of it, you can customize the color of most of the vehicles to be something different. So there's a lot of variation for these, but you can also set the scale of them to be way bigger or way smaller. And most of the other things we're used to having are here. The overall sandbox UI is a bit different than normal. All of the settings for the level, instead of being up here, are now over here. This takes a little bit of getting used to, but overall I think it's a bit better. the objects are in this tab, and the vehicles are in this tab. When we go to save or load, we have an option to create new folders. We can go through the folders, and I like this system. I like having folders for my levels. I believe that the folders are only in Sandbox, but it's not, most people don't really need folders in just normal levels. I'll go to a normal level and check. So if we try to save here, we don't have any options for folders. It's just what's the name. And then when we load, no folders, it's just the names. But if you hover over it, it gives you a screenshot of the design. And you can even load designs from other profiles. So we could go over here or go to here. I don't have any saves in other profiles, but you can load a save from a different profile into yours. And I believe you can probably copy your profile to another person's computer so that they can load your saves, which I think is pretty neat. So if I have a friend that I want to share my designs with, but not just override everything, I could just send him my profile, he can load it in, and then when he goes to a level, he can try to load from my profile. There's another small but pretty cool thing that they have now, which is if I take a plane or a boat, normally they would just come from the back to the front. Let's move this here. So they'll come from this side and exit on this side. I guess the level just ended. I'll move this to the end. They'll come from here and go that way, but if we click on one of these, we can reverse it now, so you can have it come in from the opposite side. This is a little bit weird to see at first, but I think overall it's pretty nice. It gives you some options for variations. I like it. There's also some changes with the overall aesthetic and look of the levels. So now the water goes all the way around the islands to the front and the back and the sides. So water level is now not adjustable between islands because of this limitation. So if I have terrain in the middle, the water level has to stay the same between them, because in Polybridge 2 the water was completely separated, but now it goes all the way around, so you can't adjust it. This is not a really big issue. I don't think water level being different between islands was really used much as a mechanic in Polybridge 2, but I think it's worth it just because of how good this new system looks. The water has a sort of response to things falling into it. Polybridge 2 had this, but I think this one looks more natural. So you can see that it ripples through and it creates this little thing. And then when you have a ship or something go through, depending on the speed, it can create a wake behind it and ripples in the water. I think that just looks pretty nice. The look of the levels are a lot more cartoonish, but they also have a lot more decoration, which I really like. The icons for the materials are a bit more cartoonish as well, and when they're built, I think overall they look nicer. The steel, it now has this indent in it, and it's actually 3D, so you can see how this steel goes through it. The rope and cable are a bit thicker and have more texture than before, and the springs, they look pretty similar to the previous springs, but they are a bit more poly looking, which, I mean, makes sense, it's Polybridge. Hydraulics, not too different. The slider is different looking. I don't really know how I feel about that. I think it's fine. And the wood looks like this, just a new texture. And then foundation, I mean, you already saw it earlier. It's completely new because it didn't exist before. For the props in the sandbox, not the decorations, but the props, the platform has been changed, so now it sticks out much more to the side. Actually, they changed it since I last looked at it. It looks way better now. So that's what it looks like. And ramp looks like this. Yeah, so they're not too different than they were before. Earlier, I didn't like the design. They were sticking out really far to the side. Pillars, they're pretty similar to before. I lost it. Okay, there. Pillars, they're a bit similar. I think they're a bit more defined now. I like it more. Rocks, they're still rocks. I mean, they act like rocks. Build mode in general, it has a darker background, and things that have collision are really dark, and things that don't have collision are pretty light and in the back. On the side here, we have the move tool, erase tool, trace tool, grid, auto triangulate, undo, redo, clear. So all the stuff that was up here, it's moved over here now. And the trace tool is just with everything else. Edge bisect is not on here anymore. Now it is done through the settings in game. There's edge bisect, which you have to enable in here. It's on by default. And if you don't remember, edge bisect is what lets you make it so that if I'm building here, I can place it here. It will lock it onto where this road was and split the road in half. You can set up a hotkey in here for edge bisect, and that will allow you to toggle it while building. The graphics settings, pretty minimal. It lets you turn on and off these things, set the resolution, the frame rate, and these two things. This game, it uses quite a bit of GPU power, so you'll probably find yourself turning some of these down. I don't recommend necessarily doing it on full unless you need high FPS and beautiful looking stuff, because it uses a lot of power. The settings here, there's a option to mute when the game's not focused. I think Polybridge 2 ended up getting this at some point. There's an option to completely mute it, which also can be controlled straight from here. And you can separately control everything as normal. In the game settings, they have language, of course, and then lock 2D camera. This is a new thing. This means that when you go into build mode, it won't move the camera. It will leave it where you were in... Wait, did I say build mode? When you go into simulation mode, it will keep the camera where it was in build mode. And then the icon tooltips are, for now when you're building, it gives you these tooltips in the orange that say place road, stop building. It tells you exactly what to press to do different things. So you can toggle those through there. Build, oh wait, I'm pretty sure build help tooltips is what I just showed you. Icon tooltips is when you're hovering over the icons like this, and I guess, yeah, like hovering over this icon, it tells you, oh, this is a race tool, this is move tool. So that's what that one controls. And then build data tooltips is the thing that says, oh, it costs this much, it's this long, stuff like that. I like having the tooltips on. The only one I would disable probably is the build help tooltips. Then there's camera rotate speed, zoom speed, keyboard pan speed, keyboard panning. These are all things that were in Polybridge 2. The replay settings, I already showed them earlier. You can enable disable replays, set the quality, and the frame rate. Or not the frame rate, you set the what is this? The length. And then in the Twitch, there's a Twitch extension again. I don't think this is enabled yet because the game hasn't released, but you should be able to use the Twitch extension just like before in Polybridge 2, in Polybridge 3. In the pause menu, there's also a quick save. When you're in the sandbox, at least, you can press F6 to quick save the level, and then you can quick load it somehow. I don't really know exactly how that works. I haven't used it. I think that's pretty much most of what's new. If you have any questions about anything about the game, you can just ask it in the comments. I'll do my best to get you an answer. And I hope you're excited to play this game when it comes out in like 4 days.